Greetings, this is Sébastien Dubray, Carrie Staples, and Tim Arment. We're here to present Bonne, which is a project we've been working on for the past several years, in which we explore the possibilities of empowering learning and learners through a student-directed project. The current teaching dynamic assumes that there is a correct body of knowledge for a teacher to communicate to students. In order to move away from the dominant hierarchical model, it is necessary to develop an entirely different framework. In fact, what we've been trying to do is to develop a framework in which students have more agency in the learning process. So what if your French class looked like this? What if learning French looked like that? On the surface, the union of the humanities and video games might seem odd. The former focused on thoughtful reflection, context, and contingencies, and the latter on reflex, immediacy, and instantaneous feedback. In practice, however, this union is increasingly proving to be an enormously profound one, with games providing a platform for more experiential ways of engaging history, literature, culture, philosophy, and even religion. The Bonne project is an attempt to build a curricular experience that moves away from these dominant hierarchical models and establishing a different framework in which the student as receiver of information morphs into envisioning the students as author of understanding. And to empower such learning, we've been building on a growing body of work that demonstrates effective approaches to teaching strategic thinking and reasoning, in other words, teaching how to learn. And the way we do this is by starting from the questions. So if we learn and if we teach students to ask the right questions, then we can start working together on finding the right answers. Through the Bonne project, we have developed a working studio in which we use French culture and language acquisition as a subject matter, and we hired or organized the cross-functional teams including graphic design students, French students, computer science students, music and education students, and faculty who collaborate together to facilitate the design and development of an app or a game called Bonne Chance that aims at teaching others French at the elementary level. The goal of the studio was to allow students to experience STEM learning and humanities learning through the lens of design thinking. We wanted students to experience firsthand the fact that creative and innovative teams usually seek difference as a resource to creativity and innovation. They don't rely on people who think exactly the way they do. So why game design? Design thinking is generally considered the ability to combine empathy for the context of a problem, creativity in the generation of insights and solutions, and rationality to analyze and fit solutions to the context. The AIGA states that its mission is to advance designing as a professional craft, strategic tool, and vital cultural force, to inform, to inspire, and to engage. However, what we have found is that the design process is frequently reduced to a description of form, and design thinking is sort of the application of recipes and set principles. And we'd like to challenge this because each design situation is in fact unique. And as Tracy Fullerton states, the most important role of the designer is to be an advocate for the most important person in the process, which is the end user, and that person is often not in the room. What is interesting with design in English is that it is both a verb and a noun. It is both a process and a product. And so as such, we envision design as the lens through which to synthesize data, information, observation, processes, experiences, and so on and so forth, by providing the challenge of presenting this content to a specific user, in this case, the French learner. And so our students in the studio are balancing limitations that include pedagogical issues, what do our fellow students need to learn, technical issues, when can we figure out how to code, and then gaming issues, what makes this fun. We also ask for a personal gut check. Would you find this fun? Is this interesting? Would you play and replay this? If not, why not? And so the students, as they are designing this game, realize two things. One is that designing the game itself is like a game, but also that they have to find a common ground in this design process a lingua franca that allows them to communicate across disciplines, across disciplinary frameworks, but also towards a common goal. And in so doing, students realize that they have to stretch their comfort zone. Here, for example, we have two students who are trying to work on a game on the passé composé, which in French has moving parts, two parts, and they're getting an ad hoc tutorial, just-in-time tutorial by our French graduate students about the mechanics of the passé composé, because their worry or preoccupation is to be able to align the game mechanics with the language mechanics. What is interesting is the uptake in the learning, because you can see at the bottom right here, Tom, who is later on giving the lesson about the mechanics of the passé composé to the incoming team of developers who will be working on the game. But the students also did research on the politics of the country of France, the history, the art, music, the color palettes of different time periods, and so on and so forth. And by doing this, they actually create something using their research. So they had to get a much more granular understanding of the information that they had gleaned and gathered. So the students have to critically evaluate the research and the information that they actually gathered to build the game. But they also learn how to learn, because in this particular example, once they translated the information into code, they created coding patterns that they could then communicate to students, hoping that the hierarchy of the code that they had created could be leveraged by others when they were developing their parts of the game. And so as the system is building onto itself, the students learn to become more autonomous, they learn to have more agency in the learning process, but also more agency in the world they're creating. The Bonne Chance project also allows us as instructor to take on a much more complex vision of language and culture than is traditionally found in an elementary level language curriculum. Even when students enrolled in first or second semester French courses study more than vocabulary and grammar, even when they learn about culture or cultures of the Francophone world, very seldom do they engage with this level of depth as to what constitutes the different elements of culture. And as you can see on this visual representation, we led students or guided students to take into account, sort of individual dimensions, of the characters built in the game. So where did I wake up? Have I had a meal today? Am I afraid? Am I comfortable? What makes me laugh? What am I curious about? What do my socks feel like? What are some of, broader individual perspectives? For example, what are my goals? How would I take care of my family? Am I educated? Who are my friends? Who do I interact with on a daily basis? What are some of the elements of the local culture of those characters? Who makes the rules? What is the news? What is the gossip? What music is being listened to? What kind of culture do I have access to, if any? And then just the broader macro level types of context of time and culture. So, for example, what are the politics of the moment? What is the literature? What is the artistic production? What are some of the inventions that are at that particular time period? So all of this contributes to creating a really rich and thick context in which to deploy and the narrative of the game, the characters, the problems that the players will have to solve, and the French learning itself. So now we're going to give you a quick preview of what the game looks like. This is a game, again, that is situated in Paris in the year 3016. There is a time thief who has been stealing objects and displacing them throughout French history. And you are playing Elodie, who is an agent of the DGSE, which is the French equivalent of the CIA. and you are looking for this time thief throughout a different moment of the history of France and Paris in particular. So the students themselves did some research, and they decided to pick 10 particular moment with 10 specific cultural objects that are interesting, and bring around these objects and these time periods, locations, key characters, all of these elements contributing to creating a rich cultural context with which the player/learner will interact. At this point, we have 10 levels created, and this is a visual representation of a flowchart of how levels and progressing through a level are organized. In the video that follows, Tim will talk you through a playthrough of what we currently have, at least some of it.
Okay, so this is just going to be a quick kind of playthrough of the first 2 levels of Bonne, which are still in development. So here Elodie is in the year 3016, fresh off the flying taxi and on the Louvre platform. If you've ever been to the Louvre, hopefully this will look vaguely familiar, although it is 1,000 years in the future. So this game really kind of follows the formula of a point-and-click adventure game. So there's a lot of dialogue sort of puzzles that have to be solved, which function as a way of kind of exercising the usage of French in, the particular context of the level. The first ally character that's introduced is Ada, the automated docent of the Louvre Museum. And Ada's just going to get Elodie on her way, but this robot will reoccur kind of throughout the game to provide assistance and information, such as like hints or important historical information. And she's given her first task, which is to make her way to the Louvre Museum and meet Sebastian. So your first encounter really just introduces you to the dialogue mechanics, since that's really kind of the backbone of the game and how progression works in the game. Your ability to solve puzzles, to fix these time anomalies, and complete levels is dependent on navigating and understanding not just the words, but also the context and all of the cultural and historical things that can kind of affect that. I would describe the visual art style of the future level, at least, as kind of like Blade Runner meets the Jetsons. There's a lot of like googie, kind of Hanna-Barbera mid-century cartoon space age stuff. The goal being just to really kind of clearly communicate at first glance that this is a person who is out of time, displaced in time. You're in the distant future. So this first stage is very much a tutorial for all of the core mechanics that we really have in our toolbox to use in building the game. So first you're taught to use the action button, which is a star button in the mobile interface, to interact with objects. In this case, Elodie can push or pull the boxes while moving left and right with the action button held down. So the different levels have different special items that are basically appropriate to that particular time period. So as you're traveling through time, different levels will offer different special items that can be activated and used in order to solve the puzzles and progress through the game. So in the year 3000, your special item is basically a jetpack. So you have this little jetpack that you can fly around with. So Elodie is basically told that jetpacks are pretty much a necessity in the year 3000. So you have to use this special item for 3016 to progress through. And all these buttons for these different abilities are being added to the mobile interface, which is not visible in this PC test build, but they're being added in as the action is being introduced. So this is very much just a tutorial level. So it's just showing you, how the game basically works, what actions the character can perform, basic movement mechanics, how to move through this world, how to look around, how to push boxes, how to pull boxes. It's basically describing the boundaries of interaction that the player is capable of in this space. We've arrived at an obstacle. So we have this interaction with Ada telling Elodie what she needs to say to the mime to get him to move out of the way, because right now he's blocking your progression. When the correct answer is selected in the interaction with the mime moves his wall out of the way. Basically, the game is looking for a specific kind of response. In her interaction with Ada, with the robot assistant, Ada specifically tells you to ask him to move and do so politely. So of the different answers that you're presented with, all of them will essentially give you the feedback response that the mime hasn't moved, He's still blocking your path with his wall, and only one of these answers is sufficiently polite. And when the correct answer is selected, the mime moves out of the way and allows you to progress forward. This is a very similar interaction. You're being blocked from moving forward, but this time all of the answers will basically send the feedback that the mime is subtly indicating that he would like to be tipped. So this is just a way of introducing the inventory system. As you progress through the game, picking up items and using them to progress is essential. So here we just select the coin and we use it, and now we can move forward and go into the Louvre Museum. So here we have the Louvre Museum. Elodie is at the Time Police Station. And here Elodie is entering Sebastian's office, where Sebastian will basically give you your time device, your time traveling device, after you complete a kind of like an end boss battle. So all of these stages will end with a named character, giving you some kind of sort of language game puzzle that you basically solve using your experience that you've kind of built up progressing through the level. So Sebastian gives Elodie her first assignment, which is to go to Notre Dame to investigate and fix a time anomaly. So Elodie uses her time device, she opens a portal, and she goes through to Notre Dame, where she ends up in Notre Dame in 1415. Alright, so here Elodie has kind of stumbled upon the task of helping this monk essentially prepare for church service. So as you're going through the church, based on your understanding of the text, you can kind of go through and try to retrieve the items that the monk is looking for. And that's the current state of Bonne. So this game is being developed in the Unity engine through the Corgi engine, which is just kind of a side-scrolling engine built on top of Unity, and it is very much a point-and-click adventure game. You navigate conversations, collect items, defeat challenges in order to resolve time anomalies, and restore the past, and progress through the game. You work for the Time Police, which is headquartered in the Louvre Museum in 3016, and we are currently building the main game for mobile, starting with Android but branching out to iOS as a long-term goal. From the students' perspective, they're just being designers. When you make work for some entity, you have to empathize with and understand the nuances of that entity's needs. So being a designer is sort of like being a student forever. You're always studying and learning in order to know what problems you're trying to solve. Well, higher education is asking the same thing of students, but usually without the context of design. So it makes sense that this is how designers would prefer to approach required content, like foreign language or history. Turn required content into design projects so the design student can learn through designing, since that's basically their job anyway. That's what they'll always be doing as designers. From the player's perspective, we're not really trying to build a game that can replace French courses and teach French. Instead, Bonne is being developed as something more like a course material to help practice French while exploring the history and culture that surrounds and informs it.